Hello, dear friends. My name is Vasyl Pekhnio. I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and right now I invite all of you to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation as of August the 2nd. So please join, watch this video, like it. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and leave your comments below. Today is the time when we should sum up some statistics of July, and I'll do to date during the review. But also let's talk about some latest changes on the battle map. So let's start right now. Let's start by stating the fact that I think during this time, as of yesterday, everyone realized that the story about Chasiv Yar was nothing more than a lie. Because yesterday there was crisis communication in dozens of Ukrainian media outlets and dozens of Ukrainian Telegram channels, all responding to the fake information voiced by the Russians yesterday about the alleged capture of Chasiv Yar. Yes, there really is some advancement in Chasiv Yar. We can see these newly shaded areas on the deep state map. But as of now, the Russians still haven't bypassed, I think it's the Dniprovsky Lake. We also have Klibo-Pekarsky Lake or something like that. That's what it's called. They're fighting here on the approaches at the entrances, so to speak, to the Shevchenko district, micro-district. From this direction, they're trying to bypass the lake and the beach and enter the Shevchenko micro-district from the north. And they're also trying to break through along the road step by step into workshop number 2, but nothing more than that. That is, Chasiv Yar as such is still not captured. The administrative borders of Chasiv Yar have not been breached. The Russian flag bearers have been eliminated. There is some Russian advance, but nothing more. In reality, there's no real need to talk about the administrative borders of a specific settlement like Chasiv Yar, for example. Because what we really need to talk about is withstanding the pressure, the overall Russian pressure, which has been present in this Chasiv Yar direction, particularly in the area around Chasiv Yar, for a solid 2 years now. Because in fact, the operation to storm Chasiv Yar began as soon as the Russians, the Wagner forces, took Bakhmut. And then the first attacks on this settlement started from the Ivanivsky side of Chasiv Yar. That was in May 2023. Today is already August 25th, and for more than 2 years now, Chasiv Yar has been holding the defense, just like the entire left edge of Kostyantynivka. The left flank of Kostyantynivka is holding the defense. In fact, there are far more concerns arising from another direction. This is the right flank of Kostyantynivka, which I have already shown more than once in map reviews and elsewhere, where there is pressure towards Druzhkivka, our logistics hub. If it is cut off or if drones can reach it, it creates an extremely dangerous situation in the Kostyantynivka agglomeration and the Toretsk agglomeration. But overall, we are truly witnessing that Chasiv Yar has been holding the defense for a very, very long time. And the Russian statements, these premature claims about allegedly capturing the settlement, do not correspond to reality at all. Moreover, not only are they known for their tactic of planting flags in certain locations they do not actually control, but also for these premature so-called captures of cities in quotation marks. This doesn't apply only to Chasiv Yar, but let me also remind you about Toretsk. So actually Toretsk and its agglomeration, according to Russian propaganda, Toretsk was already captured back on February 7th. Today is August 2nd, and there have still been no enemy advances here. Recently, Russian propagandists have also made headlines with reports about Vovchansk. This seems to be a general trend now. These kinds of reports have started to appear. Once again, this is the so-called advanced capture of settlements, when they present wishful thinking to their command as reality. They write that the Northerners have liberated the historic Vovchansk. Units of the 68th and 69th Divisions of the 6th Army, as well as the 44th Army Corps of the Leningrad Military District. By the way, this is the very same military district, the one that's supposed to be fighting on the Finnish border. But suddenly it ended up somehow in Vovchansk. That's why the Finns are now extremely grateful to our Kharkiv military group. And in general, they believe that they should, so to speak, take it under their protection and supply as many weapons to Kharkiv as possible. So, the 44th Army Corps of the Leningrad Military District broke through the enemy's stubborn resistance and completely liberated the right bank of Vovchansk. Well, to say that they captured Vovchansk, no, that's not the case. To say that about the right bank of the Vovcha River in Vovchansk is partially true, because the Russians have even seen successes on the left bank of Vovchansk. But this general situation with premature reports about the capture of certain settlements is actually starting to become a very negative trend in the Russian Federation, because they are really lying. They are really trying to spin things. That's actually a good sign for us. If they are trying so quickly and desperately to liberate something in quotation marks, it means that, to put it mildly, not everything is going smoothly for them. Since we're already here in the north, I'll talk about another direction where things aren't going smoothly for them either, Sumy region. Because I recently spoke with fighters from the Somi region, Well, first of all, let's start with the areas of the liberated Kindrativka and Andriivka. As of now, our troops continue to build on their success, particularly in Andriivka. To be specific, east of Kindrativka, the advance is happening east of Kindrativka toward Andriivka. Our forces are consolidating their positions, moving from Andriivka to the heights to the north into these same areas.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
This is also being done to secure control over these areas. Additionally, our troops have already reached the western outskirts of Oleksiivka, so indeed counter-assault operations are ongoing here. The 225th Assault Regiment, just outstanding, continues this operation to push the enemy out of the occupied territories of the Sumy region. At the same time, other assault regiments, for example, the 33rd, are continuing their operation in Tyotkyne, but not with the aim of capturing this settlement, since that makes absolutely no sense, but rather by shelling this settlement with various, let's say, artillery pieces. We have repeatedly seen not only artillery, but also aviation. We have repeatedly seen how the 33rd Assault Regiment directed our airstrikes on Tyotkyne. So I spoke with the soldiers who are holding the defense here. They say that the Russians are very eager to drive us out of the border areas of the Sumy region in this direction. They attack from the rear, they attack Volfine, they try to break through anywhere just to drive us out of these territories, because in Tyotkyne itself, they are suffering just enormous losses that are simply staggering. The Tyotkyne agglomeration and the nearby villages are simply settlements wiped off the face of the earth. Assaults there happen almost every day. There are attempts at assaults, but even as they approach, just at the lines of advance, our troops destroy the Russian forces. And in fact, as I have said many times, this is the best scenario for us that could exist. It's like a cesspool for the Russian Federation, which will just keep going on, because politically it's not manly for them to withdraw from Tyotkyne, so they'll keep holding on to it here. Our troops will continue to destroy them. So I would say that the most positive scenario for us is unfolding here on the northern borders of our country. Overall, as I promised, we need to talk a bit about statistics, specifically the statistics for July, which in terms of occupier losses turned out to be something of an anti-record. Let me draw a little on the deep state map here. Its functionality allows us to do that. So the occupiers' losses for July amounted to a little over 33,000 liberators. That's how they put it. 33,000. That's the losses of the Russian army. Let's write it down somehow. Well, okay, just 33,000. There we go. Let's put a cross here. 33,000 losses. And actually, that's a very low figure, because this number has been steadily decreasing in 2025. This is despite the fact that we understood our call here. The real question is about our strategic planning. We understood that for the Russians in 2025, it would be exclusively infantry assaults. Assault infantry, relentless infantry that keeps coming at the positions. And we didn't produce enough means, including things like cluster munitions. We didn't make any drones with cluster warheads either. In other words, we didn't anticipate the maximum possible repulse, the strongest resistance against these meat grinder infantry assaults by the enemy. And now, when the enemy has modernized, after all, they've adapted to the current conditions of warfare, their losses have actually started to decrease. Their losses have really begun to go down, because today we're talking about 33,000 enemy troops lost in July. Starting from March, these numbers have been dropping. March, 41,000. April, 36. May, 35. And I ask you to understand this correctly. There is absolutely no criticism of our soldiers here. I have absolutely no right to criticize, to say, for example, that too few Russians are being killed, or that not enough losses are being inflicted on the enemy, because I am sitting here in the comfort of realign Kiev, and I have no right whatsoever to make any complaints, and I would never allow myself to do so. My tongue simply wouldn't turn to say such a thing. But here the question is different. It's about the strategic approach to our weaponry, the assessment of technologies, the evaluation of how the enemy should be destroyed. And unfortunately, in this regard, the slowing pace of enemy losses is a direct indication that we have not found a way to destroy more of the enemy's infantry. Although there is also a certain positive trend, a positive tendency, which lies in the fact that out of these 33,000 losses, a significantly higher percentage are irrecoverable losses, that is, killed in action, because the occupiers are now increasingly attacking either exclusively with infantry units, let's say, on foot, or using some kind of light vehicles. And all of this ultimately results in fatal consequences for them, in tragic, deadly outcomes. And this concentration, this percentage of killed occupiers rather than wounded, that is the ratio of killed to wounded, is significantly higher in the current losses, and this itself is confirmation of that. There is an analytical portal called Goryushko that tracks and identifies the number of obituaries that appear in various places on Russian social networks and media concerning Russian soldiers. And so you can see that July is the month with the highest number of Russian occupier losses, recognized and confirmed according to the obituaries found in the media, 6,630. Out of a staggering 33,000 individuals, well, at the very least, a significant fifth are absolutely and unequivocally confirmed fatalities. And in reality, this devastating percentage is actually much, much higher. Therefore, this trend toward a higher lethality rate is, of course, a positive development for us. But the overall question of how to destroy more Russians, how to maintain this extremely high rate of their losses, that is actually a matter of strategy, and I do not have an objective answer to it. Let's move on to another analysis. There's a man whom you can now see on your screens. This is Michael Kaufman. He is an American security expert, very well known worldwide, whose analysis many people rely on and refer to. He recently visited Ukraine and after returning from the front, wrote an update about what he saw there and about the overall situation. What does Kaufman write and which of his statements should we pay attention to? He says, of course, right now, drone warfare has completely reshaped the battlefield. Ukraine was the first to launch the modernization of drone warfare in 2024. We started creating battalions, regiments, and brigades of unmanned systems. We began to form unmanned systems forces. We made a significant qualitative leap forward. But now it can be stated that, for example, the situation near Pokrovsk confirms the fact that the Russians have also significantly and qualitatively improved, because all these advances forming toward Rodinske with the cutting of our logistical arteries, the push toward Dobropilya, and the movement toward Druzhkivka, all of this, among other things, has become possible thanks to a Russian formation called Rubicon, which focuses on severing our logistics using drones with fiber optic control. In fact, their fiber optic drones can reach 20, 25, even 30 kilometers behind the front line, destroying not only the logistics of moving our vehicles, but also the positions of Ukrainian UAV operators and intercepting Ukrainian drones. Overall, these unmanned systems units of the Russian Federation have become much better organized, and many of them were assembled right here near Pokrovsk, which is now crystallizing into very serious problems for us. For now, this does not mean that we, Ukraine, have lost our qualitative advantage in the use of drones, but this advantage has significantly diminished and narrowed. Russian forces are undoubtedly continuing to adapt, and we must keep reminding ourselves to find ways to stay ahead. And here we return precisely to the issue of strategic planning. Where are we heading? And why are we only now responding with anti-aircraft drones? What prevented us from doing this earlier? The answer, because I know for sure, friends, that we have units in the defense forces, for example, the Central Directorate of Innovation in the Ministry. This is not the Ministry of Defense, it's under the General Staff. There is a specialized Deputy Commander-in-Chief responsible for innovation. This is a very, very competent person, Brigadier General Lebedenko, for example. In his directorate, in all the agencies, departments, and divisions of advanced modern developments that he and his team generate, they have some very bright ideas. The question is, why aren't these bright ideas being brought to fruition? Clearly, this is not a question for them, but rather for the implementation of state policy. So there are actually a lot of questions here about how we can stay ahead. Because the current situation, by the way, this is also one of Kaufman's conclusions, the current situation makes it very important not to get fixated and focus solely and exclusively on drones. The current situation at the front, as Kaufman writes, and it's hard to disagree with him here, is the result of a combination. Mining, because only effective mining can prevent enemy infantry from advancing. It's a combination of drones and traditional artillery fire. The queen of the battlefield, artillery, continues to leave a significant mark in the current realities at the front. It's not just drones alone, but also a sufficient supply of artillery and mortar shells, including those with cluster warheads. These are precisely what can significantly improve our statistics on enemy losses, and that's exactly what we should be focusing on. Although, without a doubt, drones currently account for the lion's share of strikes on the front line. Overall, the situation in Pokrovsk is very difficult. The Russians are boasting that they continue to advance from the south through Zvirova and Pershetravnia toward the southern outskirts of Pokrovsk. Troyanda Park, here as claimed in this video, the advance of enemy infantry groups has been recorded. By the way, this is taken from their sources, from enemy telegram channels. They are happily showing the movement of their infantry group. Even though, of course, this movement of the group, this infantry group, has most likely already been eliminated, they still show it and fuel this informational and propaganda effect, because there is actually a point to that as well. Despite the enemy's minor advances on the front, despite our constant attempts to qualitatively and analytically explain that they are not advancing quickly, they are not advancing far, there are no signs of a front collapse, and so on and so forth. But for the sake of objectivity, it's worth raising the argument that this kind of picture, the propaganda being created by the enemy, also affects the minds of those who are signing contracts right now at this very moment. In other words, an image is being created for them that this is a victorious war, and they are signing up for this victorious war in which the Russians are constantly advancing, and advancing. Even if it's just 100 meters, they're still advancing. Yesterday, this narrative was supported by Lukashenko during his meeting with Putin. He says, well, Russia's advancing. Yes, it destroys everything in its path, but it keeps advancing anyway. And this narrative, it takes deep root in people's minds. To them, to the Russians, it seems like this is a victorious and successful war for them. It settles deeply in the thoughts, in the mental activity of our Ukrainian citizens as well, who also say, well, they're still advancing. At this pace, they could get very far. I don't want to say that this isn't true. These images, whether informational, propagandistic, or any other kind, other advances in general, they also have an impact on this. Because even in that same July, the Russians actually did advance. They advanced and occupied about 500 square kilometers of territory. That's a lot. So for now, we don't have those keys, those mechanisms to completely stop them, and in particular to stop these waves of propaganda and information attacks. Well, and meanwhile, the Russians, one more number to sum up, another figure to wrap up the results of July, right? I want to show you, I'm showing you now this image from a Telegram channel called Okogora. I like this Telegram channel. By the way, I also like my own Telegram channel, which I encourage you friends to subscribe to. You can see on the screen how to find it in the social network's search bar, or you can find a direct link to my Telegram community in the description of this video. At @loop_news. Yes, you can search for it in the search bar or use the direct link. So, getting back to this Telegram image from Okogor, what does this picture show? It shows the total cumulative number of combat engagements that took place in various directions throughout July. What do we observe? The main conclusions. First, there is a significant decrease in the number of combat engagements in the Sumy region, down by 20%. A significant decrease in the number of enemy attacks in the Kramatorsk and Kostyantynivka directions, down by 45%. A substantial increase in the Lyman and Borivsky directions, 57% and 42% respectively. A significant increase in the Kharkiv direction, 60%. And most interestingly, a substantial increase of 159% in the Kherson direction. Of course, these 159% are marked, characterized by only 145 combat engagements compared to Pokrovsk's 1,806. That's just negligible. That's a tenth, maybe 15% of the attacks that are carried out near Pokrovsk. But the very fact is, the enemy has now become more active even in the Kherson region, on the Kherson Islands. And he is definitely paying attention there as well, including being guided by the lack of coordination we've had, which you also mentioned this week. As I sum up the week, I'll mention that. In particular, we've had a story spread in the media about the incompetence of the command of the 34th Coastal Defense Brigade. And this really raises significant and profound questions about, well, precisely how are we truly supposed to, let's say, live with that reality? What decisions should our command be making regarding the appointment of, let's say, the appropriate quality of brigade commanders or whatever else? There are serious issues there because essentially these accusations boil down to claims that the brigade is almost being wiped out completely. And this is also a consequence of why the Russians are becoming more active in the Kherson direction. This needs to be taken into account. Well, I think I'll wrap things up here. Thank you, friends, for your attention. Thank you for this week we've spent together. Take care of yourselves. All the best, and see you again soon.